What is going on, everybody? Nazdarachi coming back at you again on behalf of 5-9 Gaming for yet another Falcon and Winter Soldier episode review. As always, I am joined by Azdeek, Little Bobby, and Waffles. Why don't you gentlemen go ahead and say hello here? Just, no specific order. Just, say hi to the crowd.
What's going on, guys?
Hello.
Excellent. Yes, so we have the crew back together. We will be finishing out the series here. This is the second to last episode, so only one more coming after this one. And, before we get into the meat and potatoes, I just kind of wanted to throw out a general summary for this episode. Seems like it was a lot of just backstory and character development. There was a little action set piece at the beginning, then almost the entirety of the rest episode was catching up or getting the characters where they need to be at for the plot to essentially move forward. So a lot of back development, world and character building going on here. The episode initially starts out with that one action set piece where we have basically the events directly following the end of the last episode, where John Walker brutally murdered one of the Flag Smashers in front of everybody. And that has pretty much predictable consequences. Like, ultimately, he does lose the title of Captain America. We're going to get into all that. But in this scene specifically, they basically fight to relieve him of the shield because he's not ready to let it go. It seems like in his mind, he almost feels justified in his actions. So there's a little bit of a scuffle between him and Falcon the Winter Soldier, or Bucky Barnes. Waffles, do you have any interesting takes from this intro setup here? Anything you wanted to mention about it? It's really the only action segment in the entire episode, honestly. So
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I enjoyed it. I thought it was a little bit. I wish there would have been a little more setup before they jumped right into this, because it felt a little disarming. But well, pun intended there. But overall, I thought it was really good. I thought it was very brutal hearing that one sound effect though when his arm actually breaks and they take the shield. Yeah, I didn't believe it at first. I was like, wait, did they just break his arm? And then later on when you see him in the cast, I'm just like, oh my god, they broke his arm to pull his shield off. It was intense.
yeah, I felt like that was something that just had to be done to get him to stop, right? Because he was kind of unrelenting, even delivering some blows that probably would have been lethal if they connected, but of course, Falcon
it looked like he was gunning for it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think he's still a little bit lost in the moment right now, being driven by rage. But you can also hear him saying stuff like, "Why are you making me do this?" It's like he consciously knows that he shouldn't be fighting them, but he's still just that prideful and trying to keep the shield, trying to keep, the Captain America legacy that it comes down to a fight. But after this point in time in the episode, a nice little beatdown. Pretty much everyone walks away from this kind of beaten up now that John Walker's got the super soldier serum, which of course will come into play later. But after this action set piece, that's pretty much it for the action from the rest of the episode. Of course, they do reclaim the shield. Bucky picks it up, holds it for a minute, and then drops it right at the feet, I guess you could say, because Falcon's kind of laying down, but drops it right next to him and lets him go ahead and take it. From there, again, the rest of the episode is kind of like character development. So we're just going to kind of go through each character and, basically the general rundown of what happens with each of them throughout the episode. And, vicariously we'll explain, the events of the episode through doing that. Most important character in this episode, of course, is Sam Wilson. This episode basically is his journey to a point where he can accept the title of Captain America. And there's a lot that goes into that. So I think we're going to have Azdeek here run us through all of the catching up that Sam Wilson goes through here. So run us through it. Do just that, Azdeek. Let's talk about not only Bradley, of course, but also, just the legacy of Cap himself, and then, America. Just run us through all of that.
All right, so I think it's very important, even to just segue off of the fight scene that we just got out of, is that I think one of the, like the biggest like symbolisms that we had was where John Walker actually rips off his wings, right? He rips his wings off of his like jetpack or whatever it was, and he's kind of just like left right there. And at that point, it kind of just it tells you that something bigger is coming, right? And we actually get this scene right here where he's actually talking to John Torres, and he gets an interest in the wings, and he's like, what's happening here? Like, what's wrong with these? And he's like, these are your wings. And Sam basically tells him, go ahead and keep them. And for the audience, if you guys don't know, John Torres actually ends up becoming the Falcon. He actually becomes Falcon's sidekick when he does take up the mantle of Captain America. So I think this was a very good nod. Like, this basically confirming almost that he's basically going to become the new Falcon here. And so I thought that was very, very like awesome to go ahead and see. And then, so on top of that, we go from there, we go from this scene, and then you kind of have this little subplot going on with Isaiah Bradley, right? So he's back in Baltimore, he's back in Maryland. He goes and he talks to his grandson, and he basically is like, where's your grandpa at? Like, I want to talk to him. And the first thing, he goes up to him, and they have that little rundown. He noticed, Bradley immediately notices the shield. He doesn't even want to see it. Like, he wants nothing to do with it. That's not something that he wants to fight for. And, Sam, he wants to understand. And so basically, Bradley goes ahead and he gives him the rundown. He tells him like his tragic story of how like his loved ones, like they basically like rewrote his history almost, right? Like, they had him locked up for like 30 years, and the people that he loved died while he was locked up, while he was being experimented on, and all just because of him just being like a good soldier and for doing what he believed was right. He basically did the same thing that Captain America did while he was a soldier, but because he was black, he got punished for it. And so it ends up just being him telling him like, I don't want to fight for like this country. I don't want to fight for the blonde-haired, blue-eyed man. Like, I don't want to chase that legacy. And if you're like a self-respecting black man, you shouldn't either. And so you can definitely tell that Sam really is affected by this, and he's kind of just trying to deal with it. And this is where his conflict comes, where he's deciding whether the legacy is still worth fighting for. Is if can the world really handle like a black Captain America? Is it worth it ultimately in the end? Because we immediately saw like Captain, like Steve Rogers was gone, and who'd they replace him with? Another blonde hair guy, right? And so he basically has this whole little subplot with his sister, and it's basically, I think it was really touching, right? Like, we were able to portray like that whole sense of black community, and I think it really portrayed it well, because you have it from right here where him and Bradley are kind of just like really like just disagreeing with each other almost, like, and you can kind of tell that Bradley's kind of winning Falcon over a little bit here in terms of his argument, because he's just basically telling him like the stuff that he went through, like it was just too much. Like, it's just too much to handle, even to the point where Sam says, if I had went through the same situation, if I had walked in his shoes, like, I would have probably had the same outlook on all of this. And it was just very sad overall. And ultimately, like, it leads to Sam just getting the boat together, getting everything together with not only with his community, with his family, even Bucky hops in and he joins and he helps out. And he basically just goes through this whole little montage of him just basically saying like, yes, like, I understand where he's coming from, but I'm basically going to keep fighting for this. I'm going to go ahead and keep this legacy up. Like, everything, like, this means everything to me, right? And I think even like Bucky helps push him to that point, right? And then you can kind of see like he goes through this montage and stuff like that. Like, he's out in the front, he's training with the shield, he's like doing all, like, he's even getting the schmoves down. Like, he's putting in the work. Like, he's doing everything like possible. Like, I don't know. It's just a really, really like heavily like orientated on him and his like transition into actually being worthy of that mantle, right?
Yeah, I do agree. I think there's a lot of growth because, at the end of Endgame, when Cap originally gives him the shield, you could immediately tell when he says it feels like it belongs to someone else, right? Like, there's a whole legacy that comes along with it that has, not only the spilled blood of those like Isaiah Bradley, but also, Captain America and his good intentions and what he stood for. And while some of the people like Bradley, associate everything under the one banner of, America and some of its tainted history, I think that Sam Wilson can see both sides of the coin, and he leverages that and ultimately comes to the decision that this is an idea that's worth preserving. Like what Captain America, what Steve Rogers himself actually stood for, is worth preserving, despite some of the less than positive things that the actual country, the institutions themselves have been involved in. So that took a lot of growth for him. Basically, the entire series, from the end of, again, the movie Endgame up until now, has been all that development. And you can tell, like, as Deke said, they got the boat back on track. That means everything with his family is kind of caught up to par. They're in a stable spot where they can now move forward. And then they show Bucky actually gets an extra suit for him as his wings were damaged, and he's going to have a new one. You don't actually see it yet. They're saving that for the final episode, but we pretty much know that's what that is inside the briefcase that Bucky's given him there. So Sam is pretty much ready to accept the mantle and do the Captain America thing in his own way, which I'm actually pretty excited to see, because I'm assuming there's going to be a good bit of butt kicking in the final episode, because things have kind of been set up against him, which we can kind of move into some of that here. It doesn't start off too focused on Sam here, because we have the closure with Captain Zemo. Again, in the end of the previous episode, we saw him just disappear. Like, basically they said he pulled an El Chapo, like a drug lord, disappearing into the sewers. And he's basically been waiting at Sokovia this whole time for Bucky to show up. And there's a nice little sequence there, very short, where, they kind of, well, I don't know, why don't you kind of run us through it, little Bobby? Like, what is the significance of the sequence between Zemo and Bucky, and ultimately where is the resolution where we understand it to be for Zemo now at this point? Why don't you carry us through that?
So Zemo, or we cut to Zemo. He's in Sokovia. He's at the memorial that he talked about a couple episodes before, or in the last episode. And he is there, and he is approached by our good friend Bucky. And Bucky looks like he's ready to do the deed. Put the old Baron down, as it were. And Zemo is basically accepting of this to the point where Bucky, raises the gun, turns the safety off, raises the gun to his face, and Zemo's just kind of like, all right. Bucky kind of surprises him by showing that he doesn't actually have a bullet in there. And then Zemo is taken by the Dora Milaje. And they say, hey, we're going to take him back to the raft, right? And the raft is the big prison in the sea, right, where they were like Ant-Man and Hawkeye. They were all stored after a Civil War, right? So they take him over to the raft, and on their way out, Bucky and Io kind of give the like, hey, we've got an understanding here, but Io does say, hey, you probably shouldn't show up in Wakanda for a while, man, because you broke out one of our biggest nemesis. And she does thank him, but then he does ask for a favor that's kind of revealed a little later on to be something for Sam, which shows up at the end of the episode, and we don't get to see it, unfortunately.
Yeah, I would assume that's his new wings, his new suit, right? It's
Yeah.
gotta be
Yeah,
what's in that brief.
Yeah, and it better be good. It better be real good. I'm ready for it. But yeah, so Zemo at this point is going back to prison in traditional comic book supervillain style, to be released at a later date when the plot calls for it. So
yeah, it really seems like he didn't do too much in this series. It was nice to get to know him a little better. He's not really as villainous of a villain as you might think that he would be from all of this. Like, he really just hates super soldiers, and he hates like power structures, like governments that are in control and use those super soldiers as a tool for leverage against other factions, right? Like, that seems to be like his main motivation. And other than Carly, he destroyed the rest of the serum. There's not too much seemingly for him to do right now. I kind of figured that he would be a bigger villain in this series overall, but he kind of was just more of an ally, honestly, throughout it. I enjoyed his presence here, But ultimately, I hope this isn't the last we see of him in the MCU. Like,
Oh, it won't be. No
Yeah.
way. Not with him
Yeah,
going
they-
to prison,
I'm waiting for the little, oh, he escaped off screen type teaser or something. The Dora Milaje lost him somehow. Like, because, we saw him in the mask for all of just a few minutes with his
Mhm.
traditional comics accurate purple mask and everything. So, again, I hope we do see more of him. But there's also someone else who is very questionably villainous. We see Sharon Carter, and this makes some connections that we made as diligent watchers. Little Bobby's going to carry us through this as well. And we're pretty sure that I'm going to agree with most everything he has to say here, because we kind of discussed our suspicions beforehand. But guide us through where we think Sharon Carter's at now and what we all suspect, or what her role is that we suspect that is going on. Yeah, so she's definitely
Okay.
quite sus.
So for me, back, what was it, episode 2 where she showed up, or 3? It was one of the first few episodes she showed up, and she was like, well, I've been here since, the world went back to normal. Because if you remember in Endgame, we see the hollow thing that she's one of the blipped, right? One of the snapped. So we know she was gone. So when she comes back, she's still a fugitive from the United States. She somehow makes her way into being like this powerful art broker, art dealer, right? And so from seeing that in the second or third episode, wherever she really comes in first, I immediately was like, well, what if the art broker is the power broker? Because we know the power broker has to be involved. And it's looking more and more like that might be the case, because she is making phone calls that she should not be making. Okay, so Sharon Carter, the last few episodes, we've seen her in like alleyways and stuff like this, just making phone calls, and her scenes are like 30 seconds, but in this one, we see that she calls George Batroc, who's the guy from, was it Captain America and the Winter Soldier, who fought with Cap for a little bit, did a lot of funky parkour stuff, and then showed up again in the first episode of this series as the guy who took the soldier hostage that Falcon had to save, the whole border chase in the helicopter and the flying squirrel suits and all that. Like all of that stuff in the first episode that kind of set this series up, he was the guy that they were chasing. And she said, she's on the phone with him. You don't really necessarily know. You just see that she's speaking with someone who's speaking French. But if you turn the subtitles on, it actually tells you she's speaking with Batroc. So if you did that, then you're not surprised by this at this point. But she calls him and says, hey, if it wasn't for me, you'd still be in that Algerian prison, right? And then she goes, you know what? If you're over it, I'll double what I paid you last time. Which likely means that Sharon Carter is not only the one who tried to get Sam killed in the beginning, right? But she's also kind of running some stuff behind the scenes, because later we see Batroc show up and speaking with Carly to set up some big attack in New York. And so now we have obviously Sharon tied up with that as well, right? So Sharon is now looking more and more like, in my opinion, like she might be the power broker, because she's sending Batroc over to the Flag Smashers to do this terrorist stuff, because she knows she's not going to get the serum anymore. So she might as well just wreak as much havoc as she can and get her revenge on Sam and Bucky, because she knows they're going to try and show up and stop it by having this whole big terrorist thing in New York go down and try and kill them with the super soldiers, possibly get them to kill each other, and then she's got everything she needs out of the way. But Sharon Carter, super suspect, and
we definitely know that she's pretty much a bad guy at this point, knowing that she was behind the theft or kidnapping of whatever was going on in the first episode. I don't still know exactly what they were after, but it was up to no good. She identifies that she paid him the first time. She's going to pay him double this time. And that, she's setting them up, or Batroc specifically, setting him up with the Flag Smashers. And, this is very much so at odds with what Sam would want. And like you mentioned, every time we see her, she's always in some situation that looks like she's wandering around the black market. There's always like some art, people with machine guns, some type of seedy exchange of money, satellites at her disposal. So it's all been very suspect with her. You know, at first you'd be like, oh, she's an ex-SHIELD agent, but no, it truly does seem like she's doing more sinister things and setting up this big set piece at the end of the episode where the Flag Smashers movement has moved to New York and they're essentially at the GRC headquarters taking them all hostage. But Falcon kind of knows about that, and it seems like he's going to be on his way there to stop her, most likely with Bucky in tow. But yeah, it definitely seems like she's going to be the power broker. There's almost, with this late in the series, only one episode left. There's not enough time to really set it up to be anybody else. Like, she's been in the series since fairly early on. So even though they're trying to pull one over on us, I think that she is, in fact, going to turn up to be the one who's the power broker the whole time. Which is very interesting because she herself doesn't have any powers, unlike the comics where Power Broker like gives people their powers with his like power essentially. She's literally just like a glorified, you know, ex-spy black market agent basically, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I did think that was interesting. Beyond that, there's only really John Walker as a main set piece character to set up, because after the initial fight scene, there are a couple more scenes developing where he is going to kind of align for the rest of the series. And not only that, but I do believe the series' first like credits stinger, like kind of post episode little extra tidbit is actually John Walker. So Waffles, why don't you go through and explain to us John Walker's development over the episode and where you think he's ultimately headed?
I have to say that's a perfect little place to pause right there with his mental state right now. So basically, in the fight scene when he's talking, we kind of discuss this a little bit, but his mental state is not very good right now. He's kind of trying to rationalize like, oh, I killed the person who killed Lamar, so, you know, it was justified. And like, he's continually seems like he's trying to put himself in the right here. So when we see this scene where he's talking to the government, like a council of people, and they're not dishonorably discharging him, but they're specifically not honorably discharging him. So I guess it's like a middle ground. I don't really know too much about that kind of stuff. But
yeah, other than honorable. It's basically you're not in a good spot, but it's not criminal discharge, basically. It's one step above that, essentially.
Yeah, and they're basically trying to like give him a warning, like, hey, we're stripping all your titles. You're not going to be able to be Captain America anymore. If you keep doing anything, we're going to put you in prison. And he's like trying to fight back. You can see here he's like screaming. He gets angry because he really does think he's in the right. He thinks that I did everything according to plan. I was the perfect soldier for you guys, and this is how I'm being repaid. So you kind of see him basically just mentally break this whole episode. So that was really interesting. But then once he gets out of this meeting, he's sitting and he's talking with his wife, and his wife is trying to just help him like get through it, say like, okay, you got to take it one step at a time. You need to go talk to Lamar's family. They really need you right now. But that's when we get interrupted by a very interesting cameo, which as soon as I saw her face and heard her voice, I was just like, is that the lady from Seinfeld? And yeah, it was. So that was really interesting. But basically, she's like a seedy, like underground agent type person. Her name is Valentina Allegra de Fontaine. So basically, she's kind of like the whole SHIELD agent style thing where she's just working under the government but in the shadows. And so she gives him a card and she's like saying, hey, you know, if I were you, I would have killed that guy too. No one in there is actually mad at you. You know, that's just, we gotta do this kind of thing. So hey, the best thing you can do right now, pick up the phone when I call you. And so she gives him a card that doesn't have any information on it, and you can see he's being set up to eventually take on the role of US agent, doing all the seedy, dirty, like not really great kind of things that the government wants him to do. So you can really see them starting to set him up for that. Then later on, we cut into the stuff with Lamar's family, where he's again talking to them and he's saying, yeah, I killed the guy that killed your son. And so they're like, yes, thank you for bringing him justice. He was so proud of you. He loved being your partner. and you can just see like the fam was really torn up about it, which is really, it's understandable. Their son just died, but like you can see that I know we all kind of disagree a little bit on this, but I think he honestly believes that he did kill the guy who killed Lamar. Well, because like it's consistent. He never really changes his story, and I don't know how you guys feel about that.
He's blaming all of them. He's holding them all equally responsible. Like, you could tell he's emotionally distraught right here because he knows he's lying to them, and it's motivating him to basically probably go after Carly again, right? That's what I'm getting from this. Like, he wants them to be at peace and to not have to worry, and he wants them to have closure. So he lies, but I think it's tearing him up, and it's going to motivate him to, again, go hunt her down. But the only other interesting thing I wanted to contrast that with was the same guy who is basically stripping him of all his honors and titles and is discharging him in that little scene in the beginning. This is the same guy who is getting kidnapped in the end sequence when the people in New York, the Flag Smashers, are raiding New York, right? This old guy here. I'm trying to get him
senator.
on frame. Yeah, this guy is the same dude who is obviously very much so invested in the GRC, right? You can see him again right here at the GRC Council before they get raided. And it seems like he's kind of an asshole, pardon my French, but he's just talking about, I can make a call right now. We get all the refugees moved overnight. And everyone else in there is like, well, we don't have the food and the resources and the infrastructure to take care of them. And he's like, so what? They can't stay where they are forever, so let's just shuffle them around. Like, he doesn't seem like someone that Captain America himself would really approve of his methods, right? So I don't know. This is setting up a really interesting triangle because obviously John Walker is not going to like this guy. But Carly is the one who's in charge of kidnapping this guy. So how Sam and John Walker, or, how they're all going to relate in the end and come to terms or be at odds, it's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out.
I think he's going to die. I think now that you brought that up, I think maybe they save him, maybe the last scene or something in the next episode. Because I was thinking at some point, U.S. agent's going to come in and he's going to kill someone in a back alley. I think since you're mentioning that the comparison or mentioning that similarity there, I think that he's going to kill him. I think that's going to happen.
He could, yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me if John Walker just killed both of them, right? Killed Carly and killed him. I mean, get the job done. Clean up what he perceives as to be maybe some toxicity in the system at the same time. Who knows? But yeah, we've also got the severe training montage of Falcon learning how to properly use the shield. Bucky's training him a little bit at the beginning, but other than that, it seems like everyone's up to speed to be where they need to be for the conclusion of all these events. I would say everyone except for Bucky, because Sam and the Winter Soldier, or Bucky, have a conversation towards the end of the episode where he's just like, you got to tackle your demons by actually going to apologize to those people in your book to give them closure, to make them feel good. And by doing that, that will free you of your demons, essentially. That's what I got from that conversation there. And of course, we know that, I guess Bucky's nightmares aren't going to end until he, with the Asian father, goes and comes clean, tells him that, I accidentally killed your son when I was a mind control agent. I'm sorry. Basically, that's the last bit of character kind of stuff, baggage from the past that they have to deal with before the story can fully move forward, right? Am I correct in that statement, basically?
Yeah.
I think there's the one end credit scene. That's the only other thing.
Yeah, I mean, but besides that, before we wrap up, we do get that one end credit stinger where it looks like John Walker is, of course, building his own version of a shield of some sorts. Obviously, he doesn't have vibranium that we know of, unless he kind of stole it from somewhere, like some base or something. But he is kind of adorning his own shield, and this is basically just set up to make him essentially U.S. agent, right? Or the Super Patriot. I don't know which title they're going to go with. I would assume U.S. agent, but he's run with all three names: U.S. agent, Cap, Super Patriot. So
I just
between
love
that,
this.
yeah,
It's like the budget, like shield.
cosplay, right? 'Cause
Yeah,
It's got to
exactly.
be made out of steel, right? It's all these
Yeah.
different pieces that are being welded together. So
I love the just the visual reference to the original Iron Man, right? That is
yeah, he's like doing it in like a
In-
garage
in
shop,
like a- yeah.
kind of dark environment type
he's
situation.
hammering
away.
it just like Tony Stark in the
Mhm.
cave, right? And then one of the other visual references I meant to bring up earlier was during the fight, right? The visual reference to taking the glove off of Thanos when they're trying to rip the shield off, right? One of them holding him from one side, pulling from the other. I thought that was really cool, and it's just another reference to Endgame / Infinity War that they've thrown into both Falcon and the Winter Soldier and WandaVision since that movie's world-ending success. Um, like they keep throwing these little callbacks in, and I think we're gonna see that in the MCU for a while. Seeing the callbacks to Infinity War and Endgame, because I mean those, in terms of pop culture, those are two of the most iconic things in pop culture in the last 10-15 years, right?
Yeah, I would agree, but they're kind of setting the stage for new events, new bad guys, new set pieces. I'm glad that they're cohesively continuing this, unlike the DC EU or MCU, the DC Comics version of their movie universe. Like, they can't decide whether they want the movies to be in a cohesive universe or split them up or keep Zack Snyder or get rid of him and start with all new people. They got Robert Pattinson as Batman, but they're going to bring back Matt Damon as, or not Matt Damon, Ben Affleck as Batman. Like, there's a lot of confusion going on over there. And in contrast, it makes me even that much more satisfied with Marvel because it's got somewhat of a cohesive plan and a direction and goals in mind that it wants to establish. I'm sure some people might have not liked this episode quite as much because it does have a lot of real world kind of implications going on, and it touches on a lot of sensitive topics that you might see in the real world. And some people kind of prefer their superhero stuff to be kind of escapism from the real world. So I can understand if some people might not like this particular series quite as much. However, I personally don't mind seeing them try to tie it in and humanize the characters some and make them more relatable and not just like, Superman, who's completely impervious, who has no real emotions, stuff like that is what they're trying to avoid. I kind of dig it,
Yeah.
I don't mind there being some touchy subjects in the shows. I've honestly still enjoyed it, even if it's not for everybody. And I'm excited for the final episode where I'm sure there'll be a pretty epic conclusion, a fight between the Flag Smashers, of course, Batroc, who's going to be back, who's got a taste for blood against not only Sam, but against, the Captain America itself, because he's fought against Cap as well. So he's going to try and get some revenge there. Of course, Bucky will be in the mix. I'm excited to see if John Walker shows up and who he goes against. The Power Broker. There should be a pretty epic conclusion here. It'd be interesting to see if Zemo or Wakanda comes back for another kind of few little scenes as well. So we don't know all what's going to happen yet. But if you guys have any thoughts about what you have in mind or what you think or anything that we may have missed, for sure leave them down in the comments. And Waffles, Azdeek, Bobby, do you guys have any closing thoughts you wanted to throw out there? Anything we might have missed before we wrap up here?
No, I'm good.
I think we're all good.
Yeah, I think I'm good. Yeah.
We sincerely appreciate each and everyone in the audience who's following along with us as we review this kind of pop culture stuff, deviate outside of video games a little bit. If you're new here, consider subscribing so you can check out all of our other uploads. I'm quite sure we will be following the Loki series, whatever comes after that, and all the theatrical releases and previews as well. So stick around for that. Tons of video game videos. If you enjoyed this content, consider throwing a thumbs up on it. Help spread it out so more people on YouTube can get their eyes on it. And again, leave a comment down below with how do you think the series is going to finish and any thoughts you might have on the individual characters that we discussed today. Are you satisfied with the episode, or is it a little bit too political for you? Let us know down below. And with that, I think we're going to wrap up here and just get ready for the final episode next week. So for me, Nazdarachi, 59 Gaming, peace out. We'll see you on the next one, and feel free to say bye, guys.
Later, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Deuces.
I will.
Yeah.
Gotta take it out like this, yo.